Happy Tuesday. We are live. Chef Erica is tied up. They're working on a brand new project in Jacksonville. So it's just going to be me and our guest today. So before we get into this, we'll do our little check-in. Week's been doing well. Virtual schooling is going well. The world, on the other hand, is going crazy, which we are going to get into all of that when we go live here soon. But before we do, I just want to shout out my cousin and his real estate. He gave me a shirt to wear, so I'm super excited, proud of him. He's killing it in this pandemic, buying houses and making deals. He just closed on my dream house in my neighborhood yesterday. I didn't really want to be congratulatory towards his homeowners, but I don't want to be that person. So in my neighborhood yesterday, I didn't really want to be congratulatory towards his. Hold on a second. There we go. That was weird. The sound did something crazy. So before we get in, I just want to talk a little bit about our guest. I had the distinct pleasure of working with Ji during our boot camp with James Beard. She was actually in one of my breakout groups. Before we get in, I just want to talk a little bit about our guest. I had the Okay, I think I got the sound fixed. I don't know what that was, but we were hearing ourselves twice. Anyways, so I did get a chance to work with her during our James Beard boot camp. And we got to spend a little bit of our breakout sessions talking about some of the amazing work that she's doing in her state with food laws and working with the Detroit Food Lab. So I'm going to bring Ji on so that she can start to tell us about that, and we can just get into like all of these crazy current events. Hi, how are you?
Hi, Shanita, how are you?
Oh, what a week!
What a week! It's been more insane than the usual insanity we've had a few months.
Oh my gosh, yes. Before we get into this conversation about restaurants and labor laws, I just wanted to, I like to have my little facts. So I'm going to throw out some statistics so people can know what reference point we're speaking from. According to the Independent Restaurant Association, independent restaurants, and by independent, we mean restaurants that are not like your big name, multi-state, Applebee's, Outback Steakhouse, Cheesecake, those large type. They employ directly 11 million people and support 5 million people up and down the food chain. So we're talking about 16 million people across the board who are employed by what would be considered small businesses. They're considered small businesses. However, they have a 760 billion impact in terms of sales and make up, I think, 35 or 3.5% of the GDP. So there's that.
Yeah, we're small but mighty.
Small but mighty is definitely it. So then, if anybody has been watching, I don't know if you have, I, of course, have been consuming a little bit more news since last week than I typically do, just trying to like stay ahead of the fuck shit that's going on so my mind doesn't go crazy. But if you've seen any of the commercials that they're airing right now, they're like, it's a slave wage and people are not making enough money to live. They're talking about people who work in restaurants who are having to donate blood, donate plasma, things like that in order to sustain their families. And so I have a few more numbers just because I don't know if you kind of participate in any of the online back and forth with this whole $600 versus $400 in federal pandemic.
Yeah. I've been watching that debate going back and forth by people who get so much more money than our servers, just debating over like $200 difference a week.
Right. And so I had to break it down. And it's like, you guys, these are economists that came up with this number. They didn't just like rub a magic 8-ball and be like, ooh, how much money should we provide people in federal pandemic unemployment assistance? Oh, okay, $600. That's not how that number came up. $600 is $15 an hour times about a 40-hour work week. A living wage in this country is $16.07. That was in 2017 or 2018. So that's what we should be paying people as of like 4 or 5 years ago. This is 2020. We don't even have like accurate data. So if you are a bus person, on average in this country, you make $7.25 an hour. So if you work 35 hours a week, that's $12,180 a month. It costs $13,000 on average. Let's say you don't have any accidents and nothing strange happens to you. It costs $13,200 a year to live in this country. If you are a cook, you make about $10 an hour. That's $1,400 a month, $16,000 a year. You got about a $3,000 or so. This is before taxes window of money. And then if you are a server, this is great. Let's just say you're killing it and you're making with your $3.25 an hour, you're also making about $5 additional in tips. That's $770 a month, $9,240 a year.
Yeah.
And we wonder why people steal steaks at restaurants.
No, it's really horrible. My partner, Paul Saginaw of Zingerman, he liked to joke, but it's not really a funny joke. He liked to say, like, everybody wants to know, like, where the ingredients came from, what the chicken ate, did the chicken have a good life, does anybody give a fuck about the dishwasher or the server who's serving you that chicken, right? Yeah, and it's just this level of apathy that allows somebody to say, we're going to pay you less than you can bear, like you can live on a bare minimum. And that's stalling. Yeah, and it's discussed by all this is being discussed by people who have health insurance and pay time off and pretty chill schedule and higher salary than most of us in food industry. And it is quite ridiculous. And we are people who are nourishing them.
Right, and those wage numbers that I gave are, it's like your bare minimum. And then I went to look and I just got really frustrated. If you lived in New York, you know, a 1-bedroom apartment in New York could be $2,000 a month.
Oh, that's probably more like a closet with a toilet is like $2,000 a month. Yeah.
Right. And so then when people are like, oh, people are getting rich, people are, no one's getting rich on $600 a week. Nobody's, and then let's just say they have a little bit of additional unemployment money, so it makes their $600, $700, or $800 a week. You're still not getting rich on that. You're still not out taking yourself to steak dinners and buying Louis Vuitton bags and expensive shoes. That you're just not doing that. So tell me a little bit about how you got into, because I know that when we talked before, and the people don't know this, that you guys have been doing, a living wage for people where you are. For how long have you been doing that?
The restaurant's been open for about 4 years. Yeah. I remember because the restaurant opened shortly after Donald Trump got elected. So we're coming on about 4 years. Yeah. We've started without taking the tip credit. So tip credit is servers get paid sub minimum wage, so they're not getting like a federal minimum wage. They're getting like $3 and change, and the majority of their income is supplemented by the gratuity. But I wasn't born in this country. I was born in Korea. I was there until I was 13. I spent some time in Italy. And what frustrates me the most is that when we talk to folks in America who own the restaurants and have actually power to make policy within their organization, they said that it's just like an impossible task to pay the servers living wage. But that's just not true. Tipping is a uniquely U.S. problem. It's not in Asia. It's not in Europe in the extent that it's done in the United States. There may be some
tipping. I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, tipping is a uniquely United States phenomenon. because you can tip in Europe, but they get paid regular minimum wage, and then tip is like extra gravy, like extra cherry on top. It's not like your entire income livelihood depends on it. And same thing with Korea. And it's also not true in the United States either, right? Because every counter service place is paying front of the house regular minimum wage or more. They're not doing tip credit. So it's just the full service restaurants that are not doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, so when I opened the restaurant, I wanted to start the restaurant with not taking tip credit, because the reality is that it is really, really difficult to go back and change your entire pay system if you are already doing tip credit. And
Right.
it is incredibly difficult to change the guest perception because they're so used to the setup. So, but it's contributing to a few problems, right? Because it's contributing to the food and the service being consistently undervalued. Because, yeah, because, it costs what it costs to run a restaurant, including labor costs. But if you are taking tip credit, you're paying less per hour to your server. So you're transferring that labor cost to the guest. So easy way to think of it is like if you bought a $10 thing and you leave 20% tip, it's $12. So food should cost $12, but it's presented in a way that guests are thinking it costs them $10, even though
And
they
they have
paying $12.
right, and they have this mindset that that the server has to earn it, and I'm like, above a certain amount, but not in.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot to say about tips just because when the restaurant was getting set up, I got involved with this one fair wage group called ROC, Restaurant Opportunity Center. They were working with employers who wanted to take the high road and take care of the staff. And I learned the history of tipping comes from like it's a legacy of slavery, because when the slaves got freed, the white owners didn't want to pay for labor they didn't have to pay for before. So they hired former slaves into the railroad system, and then they said, we're not going to really pay you, but you're going to get tips from the guests, and that's going to be your pay. So it was the owners of the railroad system not wanting to incur labor costs that they didn't have to incur before, right? So it is a legacy of slavery, and I think we don't talk about that enough. Even now, when there's a protest and there's more conversations about racial justice right now in this country, but when it comes to tipping, like they don't want to really talk about the origin of tipping and how it came into the place. This is why it's a uniquely United States problem. But even,
And not to
even
that the food service industry is built on the backs of the labors of brown and black people, period.
absolutely, absolutely.
That, so it makes sense.
Yeah, and even if we like pretend for a second that we don't want to talk about that, but even let's just talk about the current state. The current state is that it disproportionately impacts women of color. It does not impact white men, French speaking in a Michelin star 3-star restaurant. When they have an accent and when they're white men, they're cute and they're getting 20% off of $1,000 bill, they're going to be fine. But yeah, they're going to be just fine. And nobody's trying to like get them the living wage. They're probably doing a lot better than I am and most independent restaurant owners. But if we're talking like women of color, single mothers, people who are recently immigrated here and English is not their first language, they get disproportionately, taken advantage of.
Mark right there. And now I just want to refer to the latest news. Like before we logged on today, they dropped a bomb on us that, I think that people do not even understand how devastating and what the ramifications of this if they continue to move forward in this manner, what it's going to be. That federal pandemic unemployment made people who are not normally eligible for unemployment eligible, i.e., mainly food service and tipped workers, because they're kind of like contractors. They're not like,
Yeah.
because a portion of your money is on a check and a portion of your money is in cash.
Yeah.
So what happens is when they've calculated that these people's base unemployment, they said, okay, we're going to make you eligible. We're going to give you a base unemployment plus this federal pandemic unemployment. They're making it on the lowest possible amount of money they made. So if you're a server, they're saying you made $3.25. That's not even the $5 that I said. So they're basically giving them about $125, depending on where you are in the country, to $200 a week. That's what these people have been living on since.
That is the insanity. Yeah, the laws around tipping is so weird. So
Yes.
like they're saying that like they are entitled to minimum wage. So if you only make $3 and change, the owners are supposed to make up for the difference to build you up to $7, unless you want to get unemployment. Then you're back down to $3 and change.
Right. So now these people have been living on $100 or so, $200 a week for the last now almost 2 months. So maybe they were smart and they paid their September rent. Maybe they did. They used that last July check. They went ahead and paid their September rent. Maybe they couldn't, right? Because they had to get their kids ready for back to school because now they're doing virtual learning. So you didn't pay your August rent. You didn't pay your September rent. October rent is due. You're not going to be able to pay your October rent. And now we're saying you're not going to pay November rent, maybe December, maybe January, maybe February. So by the time they decide to settle this, you're looking at people who are 6 months or so behind on bills.
Yeah, and the landlords are not really opting for forgiveness. They're doing deferral. So just because you don't get evicted and you're staying there, like 6 months down the road, you suddenly owe this like huge lump sum amount of money, and there's no way that that's possible with the system that's created right now. And then you're supposed to come into work and then clock in and $3 and change, and you're supposed to serve the food with love, and that's sort of an impossible expectation that no other industry is under.
Right. And I've been hearing from some people, some of the servers here, that in some parts of our city, people are having to wear masks. And so the customers in the restaurants feel some type of way about having to wear a mask. And so that is impacting the way that they're feeling about the server or the staff or the hostess. And it's like, hey, they're just here to do a job. And so then their tips are, now people are saying that they're tipping like 5 and 8%.
It is sort of insane that the U.S. government expects the servers to be the federal like mask regulation enforcement when it's supposed to fall into a federal government regulation responsibility. So servers now have to deal with the garden variety sexual harassment, racial harassment, low wages, not living wages, not having benefits, and on top of that, they also have to keep everybody safe from the global pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like last months we've been asking a whole lot of servers and a whole lot of teachers.
The teachers are now supposed to be like IT person on top of being teachers and like keep everybody entertained. So they're supposed to be stand-up comics and all this whole 9 yards. And let's not even go into like single mothers, right? Because they have to work and then they have to be mothers and they have to be babysitters and then they also have to be part-time teachers. The expectations, the injustice that this pandemic kind of revealed what it is to be and also heightened, and the disproportionate burden it has on people and people of color and women is just ridiculous. And I do feel like can we see now? If we see now, can we do something about it? Like, can we change some of these stuff?
I mean, I feel like now that we're at a point where I was just having a conversation with somebody earlier, and I feel like we're at a point now with chefs where we're able to really take the onus, and people really want to hear from us on some of these issues. And so now we're able to really kind of take the responsibility for that. So I do think that it's kind of going to be up for us to kind of make that shift in culture and really just change things, right? We kind of have leadership. And, you know, and what I learned in the boot camp, and I don't know if you realize this, we were already advocating for our staff anyway. We just were doing it within the ecosystem of your, whatever your restaurant, catering, food service business family was. And as that chef, I used to say, people be like, isn't it great to own your own restaurant? I'm like, I'm more like the head counselor at camp and less like the chef. I'm more like, you know, sometimes I had my employees' children in the office because the only way that they were going to be able to come in and go to work today is if I watched the children. So now I'm trying to
absolutely
someone else's kids, or I'm going to be the dishwasher for lunch service today, you know, things like that.
Yeah, somebody asked, like, isn't it great you own the place and then you can write your own schedule? I'm like, it's great, except that you're on call all the time. So it's not like really flexible schedule, but yeah, I get to write my own schedule. But yeah, I do want to go back and touch on the how people want to hear from chefs right now. I do think that that's true. If that was not true, let's take this Restaurant Act. Restaurant Act, like current political climate is so divided. Yeah, so polarized.
Yeah.
Polarized. However, the Restaurant Week was able to get garner bipartisan support. And I haven't like heard last time somebody said bipartisan support for anything that I think it's really incredible. And we're small businesses, we're like supposed to be the pillars of the community. And I think that that the fact that the Restaurant Act has bipartisan support, Republican representatives and senators, as well as Democrats signed up to sponsor this bill, I think it's significant. And I cannot believe as of today at 3 p.m., Trump decided that he's not gonna continue the negotiation between the White House and the Democrats in the House, and he decides to take this as a political weapon to use and dangle in front of people who are like food insecure and like trying to make everything work, and like everyday good people. He's gonna hold this over so he can try to win another election. It is unconscionable.
Is there a word that's worse than that? I just want to say it's fucking disgusting.
It's fucked up.
It is. And I think people that it's so that this bill is more than it's getting money to school so that they can safely return students to school in person without, you know, putting the teachers at risk and without putting the students at risk. It's getting money for senior care centers so that they can continue to take care of our elderly. You know, I was like super disturbed by that whole parade because I know about 3 people personally whose parents are living in assisted living facilities who have not seen their family members since before March physically. They go up to the center, they wave outside, even if it's
birthday. You're talking about how Trump like paraded out just to have like a political show of like waving to people while endangering the security. Yep.
I know people at the height of the COVID crisis said goodbye to their loved ones via Zoom or FaceTime in the hospital because they were not allowed to go in and visit. So I just feel like I don't know. Sometimes I think, are we being punked? Is Ashton Kutcher gonna rip off his Trump mask and be like, gotcha?
Ashton doesn't deserve to be compared to Trump.
I'm like, has he just been pretending to be Trump these last 4 years? When is he gonna say he got us?
I constantly go like, are we in purge? Like it's purge going on right now. Is today purge night? Yeah, it's insanity. And you know, there are a lot of memes out there, and one of the memes that I saw recently was that for a guy who's like dead set against socialism, he paid $750 in taxes, and he's getting like the state of art health insurance paid by the state.
Right. And people were like, well, why does he have to wear a mask in his home? I was like, because his home is someone's workplace.
Because it's
That's why he
disgusting.
should be wearing a mask in his home. It's
Yeah.
literally someone's job. If I had a whole staff of people in this house and I had some type of infectious disease, I would, one, have just a basic human decent obligation to let said people know that I am not well. Secondly, I would take every precaution within the confines of my home to make sure that I am not infecting the other people who live there. It's just like simple little bitty things.
Yeah,
Not to mention that he did say any person who intentionally gives people COVID is a terrorist. Those are his words.
Absolutely.
I didn't say that.
That's a bioweapon. And like people who work there just want to make living. They don't have to be exposed to bioweapon.
But it goes back to what we said. These are people who are in the food service industry, who are considered essential workers, who are probably, yes, they do work in the White House, so they're doing a little bit better than the average, server, cook, whatever, but they're still not making what they should be making.
They're still in the business of like serving and taking care of other people. And it doesn't mean they should have their health threatened, and it doesn't mean that they're subservient just because they're servers.
I agree 100%. So the other thing that I was thinking about, and someone asked me this question earlier today or on another, I don't know, I've done so many different, not even my own podcast, but other people's podcasts. And they were just talking about like the food service industry. And I don't know if you felt like this in the boot camp, but I kind of did, that there's a little bit of a reckoning coming with this industry, and that it was a broken system. And like you said, your business partner joked about how people care about the chicken or the lamb, and how did they prepare the meal? Was it ethically done?
What was the chicken name?
On ethical paper? Is this locally sourced? But then the dishwasher is stealing hamburger patties. That's the only way that he's going to make dinner for his kids. So I do feel like as we as leaders have these conversations about how we move this industry forward, before we get to razzling and dazzling and putting drizzles on plate and bamming and doing all that, we've got to take care of the people. We've got to deal with the mental health issues. We've got to deal with the substance abuse issues. And that all could come from making sure that people have enough money so that they don't have to live under the anxiety of lack. Like every single day you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, you're chucking and jiving, as the old people say, right? You're trying to figure out how to make $1 out of 15 cents. That's very stressful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wanna touch up on what you said about the mental health and money. So in the beginning of the pandemic, so we get shut down middle of March in Michigan, and we furloughed everybody and we started slowly bringing people in. And then what I noticed was that people who are working like close to 40 hours at the restaurant, and they were doing fine. With the pandemic, they were getting tired at like 30 hours, 32 hours, because even if you did not have mental health issues, the pandemic brought a whole level of stress that you may not feel day to day, but then it was just weighing everybody down. And we were sort of lucky because we learned of this government help called Workshares. So Michigan state government offered Workshares. It's sort of like the easiest way that I've explained is that it's sort of partial unemployment filed. Okay. Yeah, it's filed by the employer on behalf of the staff, basically saying they used to be able to make 40 hours a week, but now there's not enough work, so they're doing like, I don't know, 28, and can we do partial unemployment for that? Now, if you can also file for that as an individual, but the process was a whole lot easier when an employer filed for it, and because the CARES Act allowed the $600 federal government unemployment help on top of the regular unemployment, that my staff at one point they were working like 10 hours a week less, then they were getting more assistance. So they were working less, making more money for a short period of time when there was help. And I noticed that people are happier even in the middle of pandemic. So sometimes it just takes a living wage like the food industry has a lot of issues. There are definitely substance abuse issues. There are definitely just plain abuse issues. There's sexual harassment issues. But a lot of it,
all of that, all of that.
will better.
And I agree. When we get, before we can address, you know, the perceived lack of before we can address the fact that people don't really value the food products that we serve, right? And we want to, you know, widen those margins. Before we get to that point, we've got to address the people part. We've got to make sure that we are taking care of the people who are really taking care of us. And I've been doing this since I was 23 years old. There's some people who have been with me, you know, from a family standpoint, till I've, you know, done their kids' birthday parties and their kindergarten graduation. And now some of these kids are graduating from high school and getting ready to go on into college. You know, we're a part of each other's lives and in a family. So I'm taking care of your family and providing you with these beautiful memories. So I got to be able to take care of my family, the people who we employ, so that they're able to do the same for their families. That's just I think it's just a bare minimum kind of thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like one phrase that I keep going back again and again is that the service is an honorable profession.
Yes.
And I really wholeheartedly believe that, because there is this stereotype out there that service industry is like a gig industry. You're doing it like after high school, just for summer, before you move on to a real job. And what I want to,
you're a single mom with 3 elementary school age children. You're not serving tables as a gig. You're serving tables with flexibility to be able to take care of your children.
The majority of people in our industry, this is their career. And I know so many people who are so passionate about it. It is their profession. It's not a gig. And we do it, you know, the phrase like customers always right. They're not always right. I want to break it out to people. They're not always right. But
let's leave that pre-COVID. The customer is not always right. So in my bucket of things to leave, we're leaving $12 a person for catering jobs, and we're leaving customers always right. Those two things are trash.
Yeah. Customers are not always right. But, you know, it doesn't mean we don't treat them with respect and love and care. That's why service is honorable, because we do all those things for you, even though we know you're shit sometimes.
Right.
Right? Yeah. And it is a profession. It should pay like it's a profession and a career. It shouldn't like it should not, the opportunity to have hospitality as a proper career that's paid okay should not be reserved for white male chefs and European servers in 3-star Michelin star restaurants. It should be available to everybody in this industry.
Right. And I agree. You know what? Like, what is that? We could drop the mic right there. Like, really. Drop the mic statement, because it's so true. So tell me about some of the things when you guys opted not to participate in Tip Share. What was that like with your customers? You know, was there an educational part that you had to go to kind of bring your customers on board with this new concept? Because like you said, I have friends, and this was a good way for me never to go out to eat with you again. Tip badly on a date or a situation. If you don't know how to tip, we probably not going to be able to kick it. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah. And you know what's funny about that? Because people who tip 20% will tip 20% even if they're not happy with service, because they understand the system. And people who tip 10%, it doesn't matter if it was the best service or best food, they will continue to tip 10%. So your standard of judging people on tipping is actually very accurate. It's not meritocracy like people think it is. So going back to your question, I think I do want to say that it is incredibly hard. It is incredibly hard, especially for a small restaurant, to do away with tip credit, because it immediately shoots up your labor cost 3 times what it would have been for a restaurant who does not go against the stream. Yeah. Anyway,
I forgot I muted myself. Who doesn't go against the grain? Yes.
Yeah. It's always difficult if you're trying to do something different than everybody else. And you know, you and I both know the margin for a restaurant industry is like super, super, super thin. you know, even with tip credit, you're like barely making it. Like most of the restaurants go out of business the first year. So I will say that I was lucky in multiple ways, and I weighed this before I made the decision. So one, I am part of Zingerman's community of businesses and had their support for shared values as well as the policy that I created for the
Oh, that's
restaurant.
great.
Yeah, and they were there with cash infusion when I needed it. So it's not like we are super rich, like a restaurant group or anything, but they knew what I was going to do. They knew that it wasn't going to be easy. They knew it was going to cost some, and then they were fully 100% behind this. So, and not everybody has that support.
And let me ask you something. Did you find that your morale of your staff was a little bit better because of this? And then was your turnover less? Because I don't think that sometimes restaurateurs think about that initial that onboarding investment that you make in an employee. I don't sometimes I feel like when people are doing their calculations, they don't take into consideration the time with the, whether it's you're providing standard recipe packets or this, that, or the other. There's a financial investment that comes into bringing on a new staff person. So did you find that, while you might have had a little bit labor costs, you're not constantly training and retraining, your retention might have been a little bit better?
So that's interesting that you asked. It took a while to get to that point, because it was difficult for me to explain how we're going to do things to servers who hasn't been in that system. Like they are used to the unfair system of tipped credit, right? So
Which
they
creates
didn't want
a very adversarial environment, and we can talk about that in a minute.
Yeah. But once we started settling down, it took like about 2 years. Once we started settling down with like having consistent level of business and having the guest base who understood what we're trying to do and was supportive, food was working and all of this stuff, our turnover rate is fairly low. Nice. And this every restaurant I worked at, there was always some sort of like adversarial relationship between front of the house and the back of the house. We don't have that as much. So if the front of the house is really struggling, our dishwasher will volunteer to go bus for them and help out. And then like if the dishwasher is slammed, our servers will come and like put away dishes for him for a while.
Because no one's like, I have to be on the floor. I got to make these tips. I have to,
yeah. Oh, and then, you don't have to convince the servers not like to do side work because it's not taking them away from the floor. Everybody gets about same base pay for the tenure and the experience. So it doesn't, and we made it very clear from the hiring process that there's no job that was like below you. You're going to do what it takes to provide really good experience. So then we don't see as much divide between front of the house and back of the house. And this was, before I said, the pandemic really like put a spotlight on like difficulties and injustices. And it was also interesting to me that when we started reopening, when we had to pivot to takeout, that meant that we lost majority of the front of the house staff. And we were short-staffed for the back of the house staff because some of our back of the house staff had pre-existing conditions. Some of them didn't feel comfortable coming back to work. So then you're faced with this weird situation where you have to furlough or lay off a whole bunch of front of the house people, but then you're short-staffed in the back, right? Right now, I didn't have a whole lot of trouble calling back front of the house staff and go like, okay, I have a position. It's not the position you used to work at. We have a line cook position. I know you have no experience, but we'll train you if you're willing to come back to that capacity. And I think I have one cook that I've had pre-pandemic. Everybody else was front of the house staff who transitioned to the back. And doing that was fairly easy because they were already pretty comfortable being in the kitchen because there is not a lot of animosity between front of the house and the back of the house. But also that like working with them on like pay rate change, we didn't have to deal with any of that. because then you have to declassify them as a tipped employee, and you have to reclassify them, and then you have to put them on a different rate, and then you have to see if the pay rate change is going to be worth it for the server to go to the. We didn't have to do all of that. Everybody got to keep their base pay. Everybody got we shared tips front of the house and back of the house based on number of hours you worked that week. So if you went on a vacation for a week, then you didn't participate in serving the guests, so you didn't participate in the tip pool. But if you covered for a server friend for a shift, then you got more tips because you worked more shift. So like getting people to move and cross train and be more flexible was a whole lot easier, and we didn't have to do a lot of paperwork with human resources. You can really, yeah. So I saw, and the sense of team was stronger than ever when we got shut down. So like pivoting, we could have just only focused on pivoting and making sure everybody's safe, and we didn't have to deal with this whole other stuff that other people had to deal with.
Right.
And I thought that was really the highlight of like the culmination of all the work that we've slowly been doing for 4 years to get to this point, and not giving up on one fair wage, even though it's hard. And once the numbers started working, the numbers were fine. We had to do a lot of education on value of the service and food with the guests. So we talked, it came in subtle ways. We talked a lot about like how we provide benefits, how we pay fair wage, how we get our meat from local butchers, and like what farmers we work with. Like we didn't tell them like food is valuable. We just kept like sharing more and more information on why things cost what they cost. And in the beginning it was tougher because you have this idea that Asian food needs to be cheaper. Like, brown people food is cheaper. Right?
So, that you're like every person that we're mostly interview chefs of color, and every single one has said that, whether you're cooking Southern food, whether you're cooking Caribbean food, whether you're cooking Asian food, I don't understand where that percent, and I don't like calling it ethnic food either. Something about that term.
Everybody has ethnicity. It's just it's just called upon when it's brown. I think there's a restaurant in town, ravioli, Italian restaurant. There's like 5 pieces of ravioli. They charge like $25 for a plate of ravioli there's not even meat in it. It's just some cream sauce, right? But if it's Chinese dumplings, five pieces of dumpling needs to be $3, right? And this is perpetuated by Asian people too. We have internalized racism against our own food, and it has to be cheap. And if it's not dirty and cheap,
so Southern food people, they're like, I'm like, no, not everybody is going to be able to give you a meat in 3 sides for $14. That's just not always going to happen.
Absolutely. You're cutting costs somewhere. You're either cutting costs in not paying people fairly, or you're cutting costs in like getting in shitty, cheap ingredient. You're cutting costs somewhere. And
you're being really democratic about it. It's usually the first place that people look to cut cost is staff.
Yep.
It's staff. They're either going to run a short labor, so that means they're going to start the shift understaffed because they need to cut costs. So that just makes everybody's mood from the beginning of the shift to the end of the shift just not okay, because everybody's doing more work than they should be doing because we don't have enough people in the kitchen, and the servers are pissed at the kitchen cooks. It's a Friday night. You need
everybody's stressed out, yelling at each other.
Yeah, you trying to run a Friday night with 3 line cooks and no expo. Like, it's a perpetuating system of like dysfunction, and I'm over it.
I told someone, like, listen, we don't have dumplings because if we have dumplings, we are gonna have to charge like a lot more than what's expected of Asian dumplings. But I don't have an army of Chinese grandmothers I'm not gonna pay like stashed in the back room, and then they're sitting there like making dumplings all day. I don't have that.
Soap operas making dumplings. That's not real. That we don't have that here.
Yeah, and then I get a lot of like, oh, when I went to Vietnam, this was like 30 cents. And I was like, okay, but you paid for the airfare.
That part. You pay for the airfare and you stayed in a luxury hotel to go spend 30 cents on food.
Yeah, I mean that experience is great, but also you're asking somebody who's Korean and American to be a Vietnamese native in Vietnam. That's sort of not gonna happen. It's okay for me to be Korean and American and all the things that I am, and try to like show that on a plate, and then not have it totally undervalued, and then like force me to not pay people and not have paid time off. Yeah, having paid time off offered to the staff, I think, was really a good in the middle of the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you guys are
It's
like
nutty.
it's a model, you know. Are there other people who have joined that group that you said that you initially joined? Is there more restaurants like this across the country? Because I honestly think that as they're looking to us chefs and they're asking, how do we pull ourselves out of this pandemic? How do we push this industry forward? I think that what you guys are doing is it. I think it's the way. I think it's the way.
Yeah, it is, because the whole system is kind of designed against it. It's quite hard because up until this Restaurant Act got introduced, I felt that nobody is advocating for small businesses, small restaurants, independent restaurants, right? Because the one big organization that's lobbying for restaurant industry is NRA, the other NRA. And they're not lobbying for businesses. They're lobbying for like McDonald's. They're lobbying for Olive Garden. They're lobbying for things like that. And they're not really speaking for small businesses. So I do think that there are more and more people taking this pandemic and the way that we have to pivot as an opportunity to do better. I think it's ultimately better for the industry and better for the small business. People talk about labor shortage all the time, especially in the middle of the pandemic. And there were actually restaurant owners trying to lobby against the unemployment benefits, so that because they were saying that like the unemployment benefits were paying more than what they were paying in wages, so that's not making people come back and it's unfair. And they're like, are you guys nuts?
That's the problem. You guys.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You think that there's something wrong with this picture. Something wrong with the picture is that you're paying them like less than living wage. That's why people don't want to come back, because you're not making it worthwhile for them to come back, especially with the extra risk posed by the pandemic. And people are stressed all around. So it doesn't necessarily make it like, safety aside, it also doesn't make it a very pleasant experience to work.
Right, the customer
service. You have to tell people you have to wear a mask.
Lacking, yeah. and taking into account, you have people who are single mothers, and then we didn't even talk about this group of people. And I see this a lot here. There are people who are serving because they're in that little window right before retirement. Yeah. They can't really retire, or they have newly acclimated to Social Security benefits, and they can't really live on that Social Security benefit. So they're serving, to make up for that shortfall that they're in. Yeah. But they can't really risk, as a mom, you're like, well, I got to pay for childcare. I have to, I got to do all these things to come back to work with less money than I'm making if I just ride this pandemic out.
Yeah. This whole push to open in-person classes it's just a ploy for the government not to continue to pay and support unemployment benefits. It's so that they can free up adults so they have to go back to work. And like everything's so ass backwards.
If they really cared about sending children back to school, because everybody keeps saying, oh, their social development, oh, their mental wellness, oh, they have to have interaction, oh, they're gonna fall behind. Okay, I have a 7-year-old. I'm doing first grade. I can, at some point say those are all valid points. But here's where you lose me. Then why did we not provide the school districts with the funding that was necessary to make sure that all of these things could happen safely for the students and the teachers? If everybody is so concerned about their emotional well-being and their safety, then we had a whole summer to set up the schools to provide funding for ventilation, to provide funding for PPP, to provide funding for proper sanitation of either students or clothes or buildings, to provide funding to expand classrooms or extend the school days so that you could have smaller classes. We had time to do all of this and we didn't. We waited until 2 weeks before school was supposed to start and then was like, oh, shit, we're still in a pandemic.
Yeah, and everybody,
what are we gonna do?
The government is totally okay funding the police so that they're like army clad without the training, but they don't want to fund the school, right? So they have no problem defunding the schools, and they have no problem not supporting small businesses, but they're gonna support the cruise line, and they're gonna support the police. And everybody's like, oh, the police is so scary. I'm like, no, you've already done it for school. You have experience. You can do it.
Right. Right. I agree. I agree. So before I knew we would have so much to talk about. Once that news dropped, I was like,
I know. I was just like, this is not something that needs to be politicized. Like people need to eat. And it already has bipartisan support. Why are you shutting this down?
I don't know. But I just want to say, so we already talked about a couple of things that we're going to leave pre-COVID. Ethnic food. It's not ethnic food. Okay, so let's just stop calling it that. We're not going to be asking people to provide catering services for $12 a person.
Oh, we're gonna or for free because it's going to be for good marketing.
I had forgotten.
You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, this is going to be good publicity. Well, people get mad at me. I'm like, nothing is more publicity than the Food Network. Thank you, though. I'm good. Yeah. I got my good publicity.
Yeah.
You can find me on Food Network. Not once, but twice. I'm good. So no, your little community event is not going to put me on. But thank you very much for asking. So what are some things that you are personally? Because I have said that through this pandemic, I've become a recovering culinarian. I'm a recovering restaurateur. I really honestly took the first few weeks of it to kind of take care of myself. I did gain about 15 pounds, which I had already gained 30 pounds. So then I was like, oh, shoot, I'm bigger than I was pregnant. Okay, we're going to have to do something about this. But I did take that time to kind of work on myself and to allow, as I think as creative people, sometimes we don't nurture our inner creative. We're always expected. We're like football players or basketball players where they're like, for the athletes, they're like, shut up and play, shut up and kick, shut up and throw the ball. Yep. For us, it's like, shut up and cook. We don't care that,
shut up and perform all the time. Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to be in that space anymore. So what are you doing now? I see all of the things that you're doing to take care of your staff and take care of your team and advocate for them and the food community overall. But what are you doing to take care of yourself? What are some things that you is leaving in COVID?
That's a big challenge. That's a difficult question to answer because I was going to say, I started looking sort of outside of the four walls of the restaurant. So that's why I applied to James Beard Chef Boot Camp. And I also applied for Food Lab Detroit's chef cohorts policy for policy change as well. And those two programs together has been very nurturing and also a good companion in a way because remember our first session when Chef Monifa really wanted to talk about the contents of things and we sort of sidestepped that a little bit and then we talked more on resources and tools. But I think there was a big part of me that needed to talk about the bones of the problem, and Food Lab Detroit is really getting into that. So it's become like a way of connecting with people in the area that I am in, which is really great, especially because I feel a little disconnected all around because of the pandemic. But also, I'm learning new things. So,
I've learned so
for example, So for example, we're doing like a big picture learning about like Afrofuturism and like how it impacts society. So we are doing more content learning, which has been such a blessing. And then I'm looking at, I just became a board member for Downtown Development Association in Ann Arbor. So then I started looking at, yeah, it's been really great because you can kind of see something beyond what you're doing day to day. So they do a lot of work on like bike lanes and sustainability. But I think what I was most interested in is affordable housing, because all of my staff do not live in town. They have to live in the next town where it's cheaper.
Right.
Yeah, and then it becomes this like a weird segregated thing in the middle of like the most liberal city in Midwest. Yeah, but
People
like,
can't afford to live in the city. And you know, it's funny that you said that. I was just talking to a friend of mine who works, and we were just talking about like development and this, that, and the other. And I was just, you know, feeling kind of frustrated because I live in a pretty decent part of town, but I don't live in a good apartment complex because if I want to, you know, the apartment complex that's just right, I mean, like literally I can look, if there was a window right here in front of me, I'd be looking right at it. So for me to get a 2-bedroom apartment over there, and this is a stone throws away from where I currently sit, it's like $1,300 a month. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then there's some apartments that are down the street. For me to get a 2-bedroom apartment is like $2,500. I'm like, what are we
wow.
doing? Why are we allowing these developments to build up around what they're building around here is food service. They're building restaurants and coffee shops. But where are the people? Like the people can't live.
Yeah, you know, all the British period dramas have like upstairs, downstairs. So people who are
Yes,
upstairs are
I'm a
like rich
British
folks, and then
period
people.
drama freak. I think during COVID.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Today's downstairs is like, you know, next town where it's like a little darker and a little poorer, and then you take the bus in. It's
Right.
insane. Yeah, it hasn't like really changed that much.
No, not at all. I think that that's good. I'm really excited about what our little group from the James Beard Food Policy Camp is going to do. I do feel like it was like, we're like the first one they've ever done virtually. We're the first one in the middle of a global pandemic. We're the first one who are really working on bringing light to some of the issues that we've all been dealing with in this industry that we all love so much. And I want to make sure that we highlight that fact. I want people to know that I love food. And, like about a week ago, I think I posted this. I was like feeling really down on myself. I was like, maybe I just need to go get a job. And then I was like, my friend, and she's in HR, and I know she wasn't asking me like in a negative way. She was like, well, what are you qualified to do? I mean, you've been doing food for 23 years. And I was like, well, I don't know. Apparently, I'm not qualified to do anything else other than what the hell it is I'm doing.
No,
so I guess
you're qualified to do anything because you're gonna be an amazing people manager, and you're nothing's gonna throw you off. Like any curveball, you're gonna be under control, and that sort of soft skills that corporate America talks about and they can never get.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate having this time talking with you. And I'm in awe of what you guys are doing. And when the world opens back up, believe you me, my 6-year-old and I, and she just turned 7, we are going to hop in the car. I already told Blue that we're coming out to the Navajo Nation, and we're coming to visit you too. Her and I are going to be traveling the world.
That sounds so fun. Once you stop by, I may hop on the trip with you.
We're just gonna make a tour of all over the country, visiting all of our chef friends, because that's what we do, right? And we'll just cook a little bit where you are, and we'll cook a little bit over there. So
yeah.
Well, I
No, that sounds amazing.
Yes, I appreciate you for watching, and thank you guys all so much for watching the conversation. I will see you back here next week, 6:00 p.m. Central. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Shanita. Bye.